Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The DOJ's new FOCUS initiative puts a spotlight on the quality behind data-driven fraud claims, encouraging closer engagement with analysts who can show their methods hold up. That shift could change what kinds of cases make it forward and what organizations need to be ready for when they do. Here with more insight into how these cases are proceeding is Tom Suddath, partner at Reed Smith. Mr. Suddath, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Terry. It's a pleasure to be here.
The Department of Justice has just announced a new initiative called the Fraud Oversight Through Careful Use of Statistics, or FOCUS initiative. This is all about anti-fraud, but tell us specifically what's new about this and what is its purpose?
Sure. So the FOCUS initiative was announced by Department of Justice earlier in May. And what's behind this is there's been a substantial increase in the number of False Claims Act cases that have been brought by private whistleblowers. And what data mining is really the focus of the FOCUS initiative. And what it's intended to do is to try to provide some further guidance by the Department of Justice to private whistleblowers who are beginning to bring these cases to the Department of Justice, relying upon data mining, where they are accessing publicly available information, looking for what they believe to be indicia of fraud, bringing that to the Department of Justice and asking the Department of Justice to get involved with the case. And so the data mining has been something that the Department of Justice has been using for a number of years in their False Claims Act cases. What's happening now is, I think, the Department of Justice is seeing a significant upsurge in the number of those cases that are being brought to them by private whistleblowers.
It seems like there might be two reasons behind that. One, more people have access to these kinds of tools. But two, DOJ has established some pretty aggressive whistleblower programs here so people can get a reward for referring these kinds of cases. Does the FOCUS initiative tell you that DOJ wants maybe some better data mining to happen here?
Absolutely. Yeah, Terry, that's I think a big part of what's behind this is, there's been a significant uptick in the number of QTAM False Claims Act cases that are being brought to the Department of Justice. Each of these cases requires the expenditure of time and resources by the Department of Justice to investigate. So I think what the DOJ is signaling here is that if they're interested in these cases, they'll pursue the right cases, but that they want on the front end, the whistleblowers, the data miners, to be utilizing some rigorous data analytics, keeping in mind that correlation does not necessarily equate to causation. And so the data mining can identify correlations, but in order to successfully pursue one of these cases, the whistleblower or Department of Justice has to establish causation.
It sounds like DOJ is going to ask these folks to come in and show their work first to make sure that they've got a valid case. How will those conversations actually play out?
The way these cases normally are handled is the whistleblower will present their case to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice will then investigate and pursue what leads they can. What the Department of Justice is saying here is they're inviting people to come in and have a pre-complaint conversation with them to go through, explain to them how did they put their case together, what leads they follow, what are some investigative leads that they would like the Department of Justice to pursue. Because remember, the data mining cases are really relying upon publicly available information. That there's oftentimes not an insider, which typically you see in a lot of these cases where a company employee who's an insider can go to DOJ and say, I've worked for this company, here's what I've observed, here's why I believe this is fraudulent conduct. But what DOJ is suggesting here, Terry, is that they have a conversation in advance so that DOJ can, sort of vet the analytical process and to determine whether or not this is a case that they believe is worth pursuing by the Department of Justice. If the Department of Justice decides that it's not going to intervene, not going to pursue the case, the whistleblower is free to pursue the case on their own, but they don't have the backing and the resources of the Department of Justice to pursue those cases.
Tom Suddath is a partner at Reed Smith. Tom, it sounds like crowdsourcing here. I mean, if I can put a common term on it, the DOJ is kind of crowdsourcing data analytics. Is this something that really should be done by the general public, or should DOJ have this as an inherently governmental function? And why does it matter which way they land on that?
So there has always been, under the False Claims Act, that there's always been this partnership, if you will, between the Department of Justice and the private whistleblowers. And the Department of Justice does rely on a number of cases to seek the assistance of whistleblowers to pursue these cases. What's new here, what we're seeing here, is a significant increase in whistleblowers mining public data and coming to the Department of Justice and saying, we think we've found something here. As I mentioned earlier, the Department of Justice has used data analytics in its cases for a number of years. What's changing now is there's a lot of public information out there. AI is giving data miners the opportunity to go through a lot of different information, massive amount of information, put in certain prompts, and then do data analytics and present those to the Department of Justice. So they're using really only publicly available information for the most part in these cases, and then presenting those to DOJ saying, we think we've uncovered some fraudulent conduct here.
What does the evolution of data mining, as you've just described it, combined with this new focus initiative, mean for companies, especially in sectors like healthcare, where there's tons of data out there? What does this mean for companies in those spaces, and how might this change the kind of cases that they're facing?
So I think what's happening here is this is not going to go away. There's going to be more data available. There's going to be more powerful AI tools available for data miners. What I think this means for companies, though, is that for their compliance departments, they need to be looking at the data themselves, and they need to try to identify if there are potential red flags, because the Department of Justice, together with its emphasis on pursuing these cases, has also emphasized the desire for companies to come in and self-disclose if they believe there is improper conduct going on. And if they do self-disclose, then they can put themselves in a position where they can get lesser penalties, perhaps a declination if it's a criminal case that's being pursued. So I think for companies, what this means is that there's going to be an increased focus by them to really be doing the same sort of data mining to identify what these, if there are problems, and then if there are, then they have to make the difficult analysis of what is the nature of the problem, what caused the problem, and is this something that we think we need to bring to the government before the data miner arrives.
Kind of taking on a red teaming approach.
That's right, exactly.
As DOJ is trying to raise the quality bar here, make sure that the cases they're going to pursue are substantial and valid, does this mean that fewer whistleblower cases are going to get through? Is there a balance between keeping the door open to people who have legitimate complaints or concerns and really trying to make sure that these key TAM cases are solid and tight from the data mining perspective?
I think what you're going to see is a greater focus by DOJ on these cases, and they're going to have they're going to, I think, rigorously look at the analytics, look at the models that the data miners have used, and try to ferret out those cases where they believe that there is some indicia of wrongdoing, and those where it's simply a collection of data, but without sufficient rigorous analysis. How is this case provable under the False Claims Act case? Can we establish materiality? Can we establish scienter? Can we establish causation? Because as I said earlier, the correlation only gets you so far. at the end of the day, the government or the relator has to establish causation.
So as you watch this roll out, what are you expecting to see a year or two from now? How will the trends be different? How will the cases be different?
I think what we're going to see is we're going to see, I don't think this is going to go away. AI is going to remain a powerful tool. These cases take time and resources for the government to investigate. And what I think the government is saying here is it will continue to welcome these cases if these cases are properly investigated. And because I think these are potentially powerful tools for the Department of Justice, but in order to investigate these matters, it takes time, it takes resources. And as we know, the resources at Department of Justice are, these days are stretched a little thin.
I've been speaking with Tom Suddath. He's a partner at Reed Smith. Mr. Suddath, thanks so much for joining me today.
Terry, thank you. It was a pleasure.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.